Thank you for coming to this today. Really appreciate you coming out. This is our author talk with our May-June On the Same Page author, Ryka Aoki, in conversation with Julia Vee. I'd like to begin by reading our land acknowledgement. The San Francisco Public Library acknowledges that we occupy the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that the Ramaytush Ohlone understand the interconnectedness of all things and have maintained harmony with nature for millennia. We honor the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples for their enduring commitment to Warap, Mother Earth. As the indigenous protectors of this land, and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. As uninvited guests, we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples and wish to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community. We recognize to respectfully honor Ramaytush peoples, we must embrace and collaborate meaningfully to record indigenous knowledge in how we care for San Francisco and all of its people. On the Same Page is a bi-monthly citywide read. San Francisco Public Library staff selects titles of literary merit, high interest, and readability with the goals of appealing to the community and sparking engagement. We focus on local, emerging, and diverse authors. Our May-June On the Same Page book is Light from Uncommon Stars by Ryka Aoki. It is a stunning fusion of fantasy and science fiction bound together by music, identity, and love. The novel follows Katrina Nguyen, a transgender violinist fleeing an abusive home whose raw talent catches the ear of Shizuka Satomi, a legendary teacher with a dark secret. She must deliver 7 souls to hell to escape damnation. But Shizuka's fate takes an unexpected turn when she meets Lan Tran, a donut shop owner who is secretly an intergalactic refugee. As their lives intertwine, music, magic, and technology converge in an exploration of art's power to transform and heal. Next, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. We have Ryka Aoki, a poet, composer, teacher, and novelist. Her latest novel, Light from Uncommon Stars, was an Alex, SCKA, and Otherwise award winner, as well as a finalist for the Hugo, Locus, and Ignite Awards. Ryka is a 2-time Lambda Literary Award finalist for her collections Seasonal Velocities and Why Dust Shall Never Settle Upon the Soul. Her first novel, Hey Me Ahilo, was called one of the 10 best books set in Hawaii by Book Riot. She has been recognized by the California State Senate for extraordinary commitment to the visibility and well-being of transgender people, and her work has appeared or been recognized in publications including Vogue, Elle, Bustle, Autostraddle, Pop Sugar, and BuzzFeed, as well as Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center. She was also honored to work with the American Association of Hiroshima-Nagasaki A-bomb survivors, where 2 of her compositions were adopted as the organization's Songs of Peace. She has an MFA in creative writing from Cornell University and is currently a professor of English at Santa Monica College. Conversing with her today, we have Julia Vee. Julia was a trial lawyer in Silicon Valley for over 2 decades. She still makes stuff up for a living. She attended UC Berkeley and majored in Asian studies. A graduate of Viable Paradise, she often writes with co-author Ken Babel. They have penned over 10 novels together. Their novel, Ebony Gate, is an Asian-inspired contemporary fantasy. It was published by Tor and named a 2023 Golden Poppy finalist for the Octavia E. Butler Award. All right, we are going to start out with an author reading.
I'm going to go a little bit long, but I think in some ways this, I hope, gives you an idea of why I set the book where I wanted to set it, and also a little bit about why I write. And so please just indulge. It'll be that. But anyway, thank you to the library so much. So this is Katrina's first performance, and she is in Temple City, which is Temple City. Anyway, who lives in Temple City? 100 years ago, the answer would have been easy. See, the area had been opened with railroad money and settled by German Americans and those comfortable with living with said Americans. 75 years ago, the Camellia Festival was started by the ladies of Temple City to make their community notable, beautiful, and officially incorporated. There had been a Miss Temple City contest, a pancake breakfast with firemen, an active Boy Scout troop, a student art show at the Temple City Library. There was a cobbler and a hobby shop and a dance studio. The Yi Loi restaurant offered post-war Americans an exotic selection of sweet and sour pork, beef chop suey, and egg foo young. 50 years ago, kids from Temple City High School would stop at Fisher's Drugstore for a root beer from the soda fountain, while in the park was a pristine white pavilion where the local performers played big band and swing and Elvis and Tom Jones. And today, the Boy Scout troop was still there, as was the pancake breakfast and the art show at the library. There was the hobby shop, the bike shop, even the dance studio is still there. The park's still there. And Miss Temple City, though, is now Miss Temple City Ambassador. The pavilion has a fresh coat of white paint, and it's still featuring the music of big bands and even Engelbert Humperdinck. Yet now, rather than Germans, one's far more likely to find Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipinos, a few Malaysians, and still more Vietnamese. Where there had been shoemakers and coffee shops and tailors, they were now Vietnamese bridal shops, boba places, a new branch of Golden Deli Pho. And where Yi Loi once stood, Agu's Kitchen was now busy making stir-fried water spinach, Taiwanese fried noodles, and green onion sesame pie. And although they offered fried rice and hot and sour soup, at least once a week, a staff member would have to inform some confused customer that they no longer served egg foo young. But this evening, the park was chattering with this uncommon energy. You see, on most summer nights, the older people gathered in their lawn chairs to hear their familiar music. Sometimes they would let their hair down to a Beatles tribute band, or very, very, very occasionally classic rock. But this evening was classical music under the stars. The atmosphere felt a little like Hollywood Bowl. Some even brought picnic fixins from Trader Joe's. And the park was also full of younger, mostly Asian families who were either musicians or families of musicians. Landon Fung nibbled a donut. This was a fantastic idea. Some of the older people in the chamber had wondered out loud how classical music would appeal to a younger crowd. But these kids, oh my God, they were excited to be there. They were eager. They had their music cases with them, and some of them were looking at sheet music in print or on their phones. And as he watched them, looking with awe at the bright pavilion stage, Landon Fung couldn't help but feel proud to live right here in Temple City. Eventually, Landon signals to the sound person, and the DJ stopped. The festival director said a few words. A representative of the Ladies, now Women's Club of Temple City gave thanks, and the children's choir led the crowd in singing the Star-Spangled Banner. The crowd applauded, and the first classically Camellia music showcase began. Now, as all this was going on, Shizuka had sheltered Katrina in a quiet space across the park near the public library. Katrina was playing sixth, which meant there was no reason to rush. Shouldn't we be watching the others? Katrina asked. Astrid will message us when we need to go. For now, just warm up. Now, from across the park, Katrina could hear applause, and it was loud. Whoever that was must have been amazing. They were all amazing, weren't they? She was playing in the showcase, the classically Camellia music showcase. They were probably brilliant and gorgeous, like anime characters. Katrina, she would never look like that, would she? Wait, the classical music showcase, but her piece wasn't classical at all. What if they got mad? What if they stopped her in the middle? Katrina, Miss Satomi, "What do you smell?" "Huh? What do you smell?" Miss Satomi replied. "Smell. The smell of donuts. The smell of grass. Car exhaust. Kids smoking weed. And the grass was wet in some places. And she could smell the mud, and then she took another breath, and with the smells came other senses, and the colors, and the sounds came back, and she could feel the evening cool against her. Miss Satomi squeezed her hands. "Now, you are about to play these nice people some music, and they are eager to hear you. You're just sharing your music with others. That's all. Sharing." Katrina looked at the park, at the people enjoying a summer evening. Some were smiling, some were peeking at their cell phones, some were drinking boba, some were having donuts. And gradually, her body became hers again. She played through some scales. She repeated a few bars from Sharek. She thought of the first time she played in front of Miss Satomi with the ducks. Shizuka looked at her phone. She patted Katrina gently. "Astrid says it's time." And so the MC looks at Katrina and pauses. "Our next performer is a young violinist. He, well, who knows these days, right? Ha ha ha." He laughed awkwardly. Was it awkward enough? Ha ha ha. The MC's attempts to cover his error only made things worse. The crowd was tittering. What did they mean? What did that mean? But she's wearing a dress. A child spoke in Mandarin. Katrina didn't quite understand, but it sounded like something, "Is that a boy?" Shizuka was furious. This was unacceptable. She glared accusingly at the organizers, but they too seemed horrified. See, none of them had anticipated this. Katrina's face, her own stung with sweat. The pads in her dress were slipping, and she just knew her shoulders were standing out under the stage lights. She tried to breathe, but she drew back as soon as she felt her belly pushing against the fabric. She glanced off stage. It wasn't that far. She could run off right now, and no one would care. And then a loud and clear voice resounded over the din. She's a girl, you dipshit." It was as if a giant bucket of ice water fell over the crowd. Of course she was a girl. What was that even about? Astrid smiled. Katrina blinked. Ellen Seidel turned in shock to the person who yelled this because she was one of her competitors sitting next to her. "Tamiko? Shut up. Can we just fucking listen to her play?" Yes, please, everyone. "Welcome, Katrina Nguyen," the MC finally said. Katrina tried to find friendly faces in the crowd, the ones Miss Satomi said were always there. But to her horror, all she saw was a wall of black. Shizuka noticed her predicament immediately. How could she have forgotten? She had not warned Katrina about stage lights. Now, a spotlight, you see, looks great to the audience. But when a performer looks into the light can be blinding. And instead of the audience, you can often see just a wall of dark. Furthermore, everyone beyond that darkness is watching every move, so there's no way to blink or turn away. Katrina's eyes would eventually adjust, but for now she was on her own. Katrina could hear the audience talking and eating and breathing. So many people that she couldn't see. What should she do? Her arms were numb. Her hands felt like they belonged to someone else, someone far away. And now the wind blew and something flew into her eye. She flinched, and Astrid mistook that flinch as the signal to begin. No, wait! Instinctively, Katrina's hands leapt into motion. But the music kept coming, and unlike practice, there was no chance to start over. So she had to keep going. Crap. That was supposed to be a down bow. Never mind. Just keep going. Her teeth clenched as she misplayed another note. She could sense some older people rustling in their seats, probably getting up to leave. She guessed what they were thinking. What is this shit? Who is this freak? Soon parents would probably depart as well, saving their children's precious classical ears from being corrupted by something as vulgar as gaming music. Katrina felt herself twisting back To Evan in the shower, the woman on the bus ride, her father kicking the door. She was a dumbass. She was a tranny. She was worthless. She was ugly. But then Katrina remembered. What do you smell? Boxes of donuts? The grass? Car exhausts? The same kid smoking weed? Fresh rosin, gently dusting her bow. The perfume Astrid had lent her was wafting off her skin, and it smelled beautiful, and her dress was shimmering. And suddenly she was back on stage. Okay, she was on stage, and she was in trouble. But she was playing. She relaxed her wrist, and Aubergine instantly responded. Okay, good. I still have technique. Her legs steadied. Yes, she had her legs. And Kev called them gorgeous, hadn't they? And Aubergine, remember? Eggplant? Katrina let herself smile. Gradually, her eyes became used to the spotlight. She looked into the park, and something glinted at her. And there was a face, a little boy with glasses, head propped up in his hands, just watching intently. The kid was looking at her as if she were an angel. And then, oh shit, she's playing Axiom. I know that game, a voice in the darkness said. Darkness. Katrina recalled all the nights she spent listening in the dark. But where she had been alone before, now there were others. Now they were listening. Now they were feeling. A friendly face, a supportive glance. Whether or not she could see them, Katrina began to know, began to believe she was there, and they were there. Now, in Axiom, mathematical and logical concepts were personified as non-player characters. Working with them, the laws of the universe, and from there, one could build ever more elaborate and involved realities. The music to the game reflected this, developing, curving back on itself, creating new complexities that curved and developed and turned. Katrina had imagined that there would be a time on stage where she might sneak a peek at Astrid for assistance or reassurance, or maybe try to find Miss Satomi for strength. But instead, Katrina focused on that boy with glasses. And next to him, there was a girl with a Pokeball hanging off her violin case. Katrina heard an old woman collecting plastic bottles. And somewhere, there was a girl feeling too awkward in her flowery dress. And from the darkness, Katrina willed her violin to build their world. Let there be light. Let there be colors and calculus and molecules and starlit vistas. Let there be home after home after home where no one got yelled at and no one was beaten. You can do this. Katrina's song seemed to tell them, this is your universe. This is your creation. Please don't be afraid. Let's not be afraid anymore. A few more people stopped to listen. Some kids rode up on their bicycles, a young couple with a baby stroller, a man holding a dirty jacket and a lunchbox. Katrina played for people who loved Axiom, for people who had never heard that game in all their lives. Katrina played for people who never thought they could play a game at all. And as she played, she thought of a helpful voice bringing clothes she wanted, a friendly face selling Cinnabons. And this world is for you and you and you and you and you. She hadn't even noticed when she stopped playing. Katrina looked at Astrid, then at the audience. She realized the music was over. The crowd started clapping. It felt like sunshine. It sounded like rain. She looked for her teacher, but Miss Satomi was not in her seat. She started walking off stage to find her, but Astrid grabbed her arm. Katrina, thank your fans. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful reading. And so now we'll have the in conversation portion with Julia.
Hi there. Okay, so, before this event started, Ryka and I were brainstorming, and I sent her some notes, and I put in the dreaded question that authors really, really fear. And I said, could you tell folks what your book is about?
Gosh, so anyway, I'm going to try this. I was going to try to sneak out of this, but I was going to try this. So anyway, Shizuka Satomi is this violinist, and she was a young prodigy, and she lost her faith in her own performance. So she ended up selling her soul to the devil. As one does, because, art. And, but she realizes when she's playing that it's not really her playing, so she kind of pulls out of the deal, and she wants to win her soul back. And so because she technically hadn't completed the contract, they said, you can get your soul back, but we need 7 in return. The Avenged Sevenfold kind of thing. I don't know if you like their music. It's a little preachy for me. But in any case, so she's trying to win her soul back, and she's basically what she's doing is she is trying to find 7 prodigies that she can corrupt and bring and burn in hell. And she's also thinking to herself, I'll just find 7 people who are brilliant and talented, but morally decrepit and schmucks, and it doesn't really matter. And so she's doing that, and of course, so she's done 6. She's not nice. And she needs 1 more. But she's also got something else going on with her, that she has never found anybody that she could really communicate her music with. These are people that were interested in the fame or the technique or something, but she's never really had a chance to convey music. And she wants with her 7th to be something really, really special. And so she's being very, very picky. And she ends up finding a trans runaway, Katrina Nguyen, who all she wants to do is be safe and eat and play video game music and, occasionally not have to do so many webcam shows because she's trying to make ends meet. And so, but she has a gift for music. And so Shizuka takes her in first as a prospective soul, but realizing that they're kindred spirits in some ways, and begins to feel maternal in a way that she never has. And so now she's torn between the love of her life and the love of her child, despite that. And there's also a galactic space captain with donuts and a cursed violin person, and there's an artificial life form, and there's antimatter.
Okay, so we'll get to all of those. I had never annotated a book before, but in prepping for today's talk, I annotated my copy on the reread. And, the first time I read this book, first I should ask, who here has read the book?
Oh my gosh, you're amazing.
Look at you, no spoilers.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you.
And
there's going to be no book sales, they already read it.
So the first time I read it, I thought, oh, this is Katrina's story. And then the second time I read it, I thought, oh, it's Shizuka's story. And Katrina is like the stakes character. Can you talk about the relationship between these 2 women and how it's more than just teacher and student?
Well, I mean, what I come back to is they say when you're a young Shakespearean actor, you want to play Hamlet. When you're an old Shakespearean actor, you want to play Lear. That kind of feeling. And these are 2 very different sides of me. I think that Katrina, it's like what happened with Katrina, a lot of that, unfortunately, is autobiographical. There's not very much in there that has neither happened to me or somebody very, very close to me. Yeah. And so I wanted to write that end to talk about the way things were, the way things can be. Shizuka, for everything else that she's done wrong, in some ways it's my feeling that maybe one day I will find a way to redeem myself. Because when a queer person survives, we don't always do things that we're proud of. And so Shizuka has compassion, but it was very, very important that, and people ask, why is Shizuka painted so gray? Well, because who isn't at that point in time? So Shizuka, a lot of it is in some ways, I identify with Shizuka a lot more now, being older, but not that we're the same, but in some ways I'm kind of like writing hope that maybe after all I've seen, and frankly after all the sins I've committed, I can find some sort of redemption.
I do feel the redemption arc is so strong in this book. Like here you have Shizuka who has, sacrificed 6 souls to hell, so a little dark.
I haven't done that, actually. It was mostly being mean to people.
It's just students in your writing class, it's fine. But there is this hopefulness, and as a reader, we root for her. So I want to ask, actually, from a craft level, how you do that so that we care so much about her and her redemption arc.
I think when we're building characters for readers, I think the best thing we can do for readers is really respect them and understand that sometimes the choices are going to be a little bit ragged and a mess. But if you write them with, I don't want to use the word authenticity, but if you write with plausibility, you write knowing that these are choices that maybe a friend might make, maybe that you might make, or maybe wish you would have the courage to make, you can start to have your readers, I think, invest some of their own agency in these characters and think, well, that's a part of me here, that's a part of me here, that's a part of me here. The idea is not to have your readers investing in a character. For me, the mission and the goal is to have the characters as a catalyst to have the readers believe in themselves. If they see themselves in your character, then they're rooting for themselves, they're rooting for you, and that's what I try to do. A lot of what I work is just as a trans person. You feel like a lot of the world doesn't really understand you, and so when I'm writing, and if I can get a reader to understand what I'm writing, then there you are. I'm not that different.
When we follow Katrina on this journey, we also witness all the hardships that she is enduring. But there's such an innocence to her, the way she experiences new things with wonder, like even if it's something as simple as a meal. Can you talk about those choices in crafting Katrina so that we can still share those moments of joy?
I think one of the I think errors that we have when we're looking at kids, queer kids of color growing up, is that they're jaded through and through. And both as a teacher, I'm a volunteer with the LA LGBT Center. My own experiences growing up, there is an innocence because they never had parents to tell them these things. And so there's like an edge, but then there's a softness. There's a yearning. And it's something that's very delicate, very soft. And so I try to render that these are people who didn't believe in people, but still believed somehow in the world because nobody told them not to. And so that's kind of where they are. So Katrina understands that everyone's looking at her in the bus, but she still somehow believes that a beautiful piece of music reaches something beyond that. And that's kind of where it is.
One of my favorite parts is when she says one morning, I had a dream, and her name is Aubergine. Can you talk about her connection to her musical instruments?
I think it all comes, this was one where actually, so a lot of things came out of order and in order. There's a scene in the book where she learns how to sing through her instrument. Yes. That just happened to me while writing the book. I had to learn how to play violin to finish this book. I'm a pianist, and so one of the great gifts that Katrina and Shizuka gave me is I play the violin now. But I remember, I am attached to the violin like I was never attached to the piano, because when you're trans, your voice doesn't get up there. I'm sorry, I'm never going to be Maria Callas. I'm never going to sing so there's a lot of dysphoria hooked up into the voice. I can play with timbre, I can play with intonation, I cannot play with pitch. I am limited by what I can do. So when I played the violin, suddenly I could play arias. I could get up there. And it became an extension of my voice, and it became part of me. And so in that, the idea of naming the instrument and making it yours, not as a possession, but as part of you. It's almost like when you do any sort of body modification, taking hormones, or some people might be getting tattoos or some kind of, it doesn't become art anymore, right? It becomes something far more intimate. And so in this way, I wanted to show that the violin is not something over there anymore. It helps me be whole.
So in talking about the violin, I confess that my favorite character is actually Lucia. And so we talked about this, and I said, can you explain why she's in this book? Like, why does it work? Because really, there's already so much going on. But when I tabbed her vignettes, I gave her blue, and I was like, her storyline permeates the entire novel. So I was like, okay, why does she need to be here?
There's two things going on here. Like, for example, there are, if you think about it, the women have been categorically erased from making violins. There's an American right now who was making violins. I forget her name because I'm brain farting right now. But women were working with Stradivari, women were working with Guarneri. Their names were removed because having their names in the book in their violin would lower the value of the violin. So they had their names erased. And so there was that. And that was something, and then there was also, and it's very, very personal, the person who does my hair finally bought a salon of her own and was trying to get people to trust her because she was younger, and we would have lunch and she would be talking about her frustrations, like the other owner who had been this old Asian guy with long hair, nobody ever asked him these questions, and why is this all happening, which was really weird, again, because we trust women to style our hair. Why are we stopping when they own the whole business? Why can't they do that too? And so I put them together and created Lucia, and this idea that you're in something where women have been historically erased, and also you've got the contemporary problems with people don't think you know what you're doing.
She is a really big character when I think about it, because she's a mother, she's a sister, she's a daughter, a granddaughter, and each one of those...
There's a novella coming out one of these days.
Yeah, and there are all these layers of what other people put on her, and then in the course of the book, she kind of sheds all those things. And in the same way, Shizuka is very instrumental in helping her discard or reframe past experiences, right?
And with Lucia, you notice that she's kind of morally gray. She's still dealing with Tremont, she's still dealing with the demons, she's still dealing with all of this, because women get to be successful and bad at the same time. And that was really my thing, where it's like, no, you don't have to be an angel to be successful. You can work out that moral shit later, and there's that. So that's it was really important for me to draw these characters as gray, as morally, not made gray, morally colorful. How's that, better? Morally colorful, because so many, one thing about being trans, at least my experience is, you study a lot of women. You just do. They become your heroes. They really do. They become, in some ways, maybe it might be a gift to be trans, because when I was growing up, I was just looking for heroes, for people that I could model myself after. And it made me understand that, no, these are colorful people. They may not, to call them angels or Madonnas and horrors is just so reductive. And so when I'm making my characters, I want to show that, and I'm trusting that my readers understand that they don't have, it's again holding yourself up to unrealistic standards.
Yeah, and I think the language is so important, right? I wouldn't even call her morally gray. I just think that if she were a man, we would say she was driven.
There
she
you go.
was
Thank you.
Ambitious.
Yes.
She was a craftsman, right? Like that. We don't have to call her morally gray. She's just good at her job, you know? Anyway, she is my favorite character.
She said it better than I could.
So one of the things I always want to talk about in books and world building is I always want to talk about the food. And there is a scene in here that made me laugh so much, and it's when they go to Olive Garden. So can you explain why you included the scene with
Oh my
Lan?
God, when you're Asian, Olive Garden's the shit. It's like white people food. So much white people, and it's like free breadsticks, and it's good. And then like, okay, so like we were, so I'm staying with my friend KB, and we are in Oakland, and we're seeing these hardworking Asian grandmas waiting for vegetables for the produce, right? And they work so dang hard. They do, you know, often covering up from lowlifes in their family, but it's a whole kind of drama. Imagine being able to get soft bread, all you can have, and salad, and it's nice, and soup, and someone's going to wash the dishes for you. And this is just really, really nice. And they bring their food to you, and you didn't have to wash that water cup. And it's these things. And I wanted to show that, you know, sometimes when you come in as any sort of immigrant, whether it's an immigrant from Vietnam or an immigrant from, you know, the galactic empire, these little things are going to make a difference, because in all immigrant families, mothers and grandmas work dang hard.
So this is already such a big story between Shizuka and Katrina and hell. At what point did you say, you know what this needs? It needs an alien. It needs an alien family living and working in a donut shop.
Well, I mean, I come on, donuts, but all right, so from a technical point, I didn't want to go too heavy into gods and demons. I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to do that because well, it's just not what I wanted to do. So I wanted to have I did want to have a demon. You notice I often say demon. I didn't say devil in there because, again, I didn't want to raise that. I wanted to keep it there. But if you play with that long enough, then you're going to get into theological discussions that I didn't want the focus to be that. I wanted the focus to be on these very human characters. So I needed something to counterbalance power. And so if I can't have, you know, so it's not angels versus demons, or devils, it's aliens that we can bring in a different way. So, you know, it was a mashup, but the logic behind it was, you had a demon, you had hell. I needed something to pull them away, you know, and that's where I went with that. Yes. So. Mm-hmm.
So I think when I saw the cover of your book, I had a very like Douglas Adams type of connection to this book. But when I read about your aliens, they just feel like your neighbors. And so I wanted to know.
They're supposed to be, you know, yeah.
I wanted
they
to know.
are our neighbors. We're Asians.
When you were building your family from the Galactic Empire, what things did you want to include in the book for your readers?
I wanted to include, so the Galactic Empire, I was coming back from LAX, and how many of you are familiar with Los Angeles? And so, you know Randy's Donuts, the big old donut thing, right? And so what ended up happening was I was flying in, actually from San Francisco, I was flying in, and I was flying at night, and there's this one route where you bank, and then you're kind of a little bit off balance anyway, and then you look down and you see the lights of LA, and you don't quite for a split second know if you're going up or down. And LA looks like, you know, it's vast, right? It's stars. And so I just kind of felt like, what if I could, and now my brain's thinking because it's late, and I'm asking myself, you know, imagine flying into stars. And then On the way home, I pick up my car, and I'm driving home amongst the lights, and I'm trying to pretend I'm still in my shuttlecraft because I'm a geek that way. And I see Randy's Donuts, and I think, wow, it's like a space station. It's lit so beautifully, and there's food there, and there's
It's pretty magical.
and then there's this giant donut, and I thought, what if there's a Stargate there? And then I thought, what if I shoot 2 lesbians through that Stargate?
My husband once asked me, like, what do writers think about? And I explained, we ask a lot of what-if questions.
And so the book started with that scene, and I just worked backwards.
Okay.
I'm going to get 2 lesbians through that donut. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to call the forces of hell to do it, but I'm going
So in this love story between Shizuka and Lan, they obviously come from 2 different worlds, like literally. How did you navigate sort of the normal romantic milestones? Like, okay, here's how I'm going to write their meet cute. Like, did you plot it that way?
Well, I mean, I really had to go to the bathroom, and there's that whole scene where they met. But in general, it comes from characterization. I wanted them to have and I wasn't even sure if it was going to be a romance at first. Wasn't sure. There were 2 places that there could have been romances. It could have been between Lan and Shizuka, and there could have been, one with Katrina, right? But I realized as they started meeting, Katrina doesn't need a lover, Katrina needs a sister. But those 2, because they'd been so beat up, they'd been jaded, they've done sacrifices, both of them are I wanted them to fall in love with precautions. I wanted them to have guard up. I wanted them to understand, they get it. They understand that life will not be easy. Even when they're together, life's not going to be easy. And so I wanted to give them that. So back to your question, it all came from character first, where I wanted to make these, so they started to meet, and I started to let that happen. And I actually fought the romance for a while, probably because I've been through stuff. But I guess they really they really loved each other, and go them. So by not pushing it, but by actually pulling on the relationship, by actually resisting, as the author, resisting on the relationship, you made them yearn for each other more. And then when they do that, I think it helps a lot.
That was very successful, I just want to
thank
say. Okay, so one of the questions I had about food was, you have this scene, it's kind of like a power play scene between Shizuka and the demon, and it's over Hainanese chicken. Can you talk about that place and how you conceived of this setting and this scene for these 2 characters?
Gosh. It's really a difficult question, because that whole scene with the chicken all kind of just came out. Because I love Hainanese chicken. It's one of my who doesn't love it? But I also know that sometimes people, do you know what I'm talking about when we're talking about Hainan chicken rice? Yeah, and it's kind of like sometimes there are when it first came out, a lot of people who weren't Asian were thinking it's just boiled chicken. What are you even doing? It's not boiled, it's poached. It's poached, it's poached. And so that one, I wish I could say something intelligent, but really that was me just running with it. And just sometimes, that was one of those scenes where I don't know how I wrote that, but sometimes you just get into some sort of weird fever dream where you're talking with the devil over your Hainan chicken rice and things happen.
Okay, I have one last question, and then maybe we could take audience question. But how did this sort of theme of the cursed violin crop up in your writing? Because I felt like it showed up a little bit later, and I was like very curious about this thing. I wondered if it was something you'd experienced as a musician.
I think that it's not that, that's not so much about the violin. This was a difficult one to write because I'm trans, and I love being trans. I think in some ways it's a blessing, in many ways it is. But there's also this part of, why did this happen to me? And so that feeling of the curse is actually directly that, where it's like I felt, and forgive me, because this is not right or wrong, this is just me being honest. Sometimes I do look at the way I am in this world as a bit of a curse. And how can I work with this curse to make it something good? You know, people talk about being trans. It's like, yeah, you know, it's a cool thing. There are a lot of cool things, but to be treated like this in the world this way, nobody would choose that in their right mind. It's bad out there for us. And so you wonder, what did I do? What did I do to deserve this? And you can really lapse into self-pity, as I have many times. And so writing this book was really, I wouldn't say healing, because if I were healing, I'd wake up and things would be better. But it was very much processing. So it became kind of a metaphor for that. So the idea of a cursed violin being that cursed thing, that cursed part of you that makes music, that cursed part of you that sings, that cursed part of you that prays, and everything that I am is tied in with that. So that's where it came from.
There's something that happens over and over in the book, and it's so skillful, but it's the way Shizuka helps Katrina see things differently. And maybe because Shizuka is coming at it from a craft perspective as a teacher, whereas she's not trying to heal Katrina's emotional wounds, but it's something that happens through the process of their music lessons.
The thing what I wanted to do with, they talk about the idea in early trans discourse, they're talking about having a female soul. And the idea of selling a soul to the devil, and, you know, soul. So I started to think about that. The goal was not to make Shizuka a savior. Shizuka she's just interested in music. She doesn't care. She doesn't really care if it's a hamster. You know, if it plays and she can sell the soul, we're good. You know, that's what she wants. And I wanted to show that how somebody who didn't care, who didn't have time to care. Shizuka has no time for transphobia. Shizuka is interested in more important things, music. And so to show that, you know, from that very sort of, I have no F's to give here, can you play or not? She can be so healing and nurturing to Katrina, and in so many ways, there's a lot of trans folk, a lot of queer folk, a lot of misfit folk. It's not always about queer and gender. Misfit folk who have so much to offer, but you see the misfit part. You don't see the gifts. You don't see all the gifts that they have. And if you just like not care about that part, you can get some beautiful music or beautiful things. And that's kind of what I wanted to write there. So it was really important to make Shizuka not morally amazing. This is not a savior. This is somebody with shit to do and you know, souls to sell. But it's funny that just somebody who is like that, because she sees Katrina just as that, all of the transphobia gets erased and it becomes redemptive.
Do we want to take audience questions?
Let's take questions. And for those of you stuck around, I know we're running late and I know there's things going on. I'm just so grateful for y'all to be here.
Do you guys want to point out who you want us to call on, or?
We'll let you do it since you have the mic.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. First, your book was amazing. Absolutely beautiful. The way that you write is just stunning. Just 10 out of 10. But so one thing that I really loved about your book is you've got scenes that just stick in my head. The scenes are beautiful. They're really, I remember them very well. Like the scene when she's trying to pick out one of Shizuka's violins, and when Shizuka touches the portrait of Lucia's grandfather. How do these scenes come to you? Do you think of them, or are they just like, oh, I gotta write that, like with the Stargate?
Yeah, I tried to read and think about it. Great question, by the way. And inhabit those spaces. What comes next? What comes next? And really, it's the idea, you want the character to get from point A to point B, but I really try to be aware of the setting that I'm in. Like, I actually toured violin luthier workshops and smelled and looked around, and that's part of the research I'm doing just to get those. And then and I think in some ways this is good about being trans and queer. What do I have to work with? And so you're in the setting. What does the setting offer me? So then when my advice if you're writing is to really situate in the setting and really don't just say you're in a room, but paint the room. The audience might not ever make it into the final, but you know it's there. You're welcome.
You talked earlier about the morally colorful characters, and it seems like all of the main characters in the book make decisions at some point that hurt other people, except for Katrina. Katrina struggles, but to me, I don't see any places where she makes choices that hurt others. Can you talk about why she is that way as a character?
It's funny you say that, because at the end it's like people are saying, she's still in a relationship with the person who abused her, towards the end and things like that. I wanted Katrina to be a survivor and to do whatever possible. Again, it's a situation where she's actually still too early to do really evil, rotten things. She's still exploited. She's still in survival mode. Although later, she does accept a car, and things like that. By the way, it's not a Tesla. I've officially retconned that. Okay, it's another Jaguar. Go to my Blue Sky page. It's an official retcon. Okay, good. But the thing about it is, you have to have time, because she's in a different stage. She's a different part of her arc. She's an exploitee, not an exploiter, which is not to say that she won't become one later.
You just said that Shizuka didn't have time for that shit because she needed to get this soul in, but she did pick Katrina on top of, what was the girl's first name? Yeah, and so clearly she wasn't just trying to do the soul bit because she had an easier target, right? So why did you have her pick Katrina instead of the other violinist that was sitting right there for the taking?
It was because, again, Shizuka's in some ways, from Tremon's point of view, Shizuka's a problem child. Messed up the contract, and even here is continuing to mess things up. Because at the end of the day, with Tamiko, she could just say, boom, go ahead, good, you're good to go. But she was feeling more dissatisfied with doing that, and she was thinking, okay, I get my soul back, but I spent this entire career as a teacher. What I've accomplished, I've taught them nothing. I want something. And so it was the hope and the promise that she could see that Katrina had a deeper perception of music at that point than Tamiko did. Tamiko had much better training, was much farther along in her profession, and, by the way, was no slouch in her comprehension of music. But there was something intangible that Katrina had that Shizuka was going after. Now, I don't exactly know what that is. All I know is that Shizuka was after it. And that's the whole thing. Sometimes when you're dealing with someone who's a genius, you don't know what they're after, but she found it there. Thank you very much.
Hi.
Hi.
I thought that you did something really beautiful with these two parallel things that happened, where Shizuka, you find out real early on that she's sold souls, and you think, oh, that's bad. But then there's this, over time, you very lightly paced out the context and the details and the fact that her students did have a choice, which was a huge reveal, in my opinion. And I feel like that went really well with the story of like her relationship with Katrina, because like from the very beginning you could kind of tell that there was something about how she picked Katrina that seemed like she was after something that wasn't just to sell her soul, that there was like a kindness between them, and that seemed totally opposite to the fact that she's sold these souls and she only cares about herself. And it seemed like there was this context that you were sort of looking for, and you did such a beautiful job of like revealing it little by little over time, and also revealing like her relationship with Katrina over time. And that parallel was beautiful to me, and I just wanted to hear if you had anything you wanted to say about that.
It was one of the hardest things in the book to do, and that was, thank you for bringing that up. I had to sell that I couldn't make her too nice, because you had to believe that she might actually do this, you know, which is why the 6 characters before showed she had done it. And the whole thing was I had to make her a credible threat, because I knew that otherwise it was just there'd be no tension in that. The other thing with Shizuka too is, I think one of the things, back to your question also, the thing is, in some ways, when you think about why Shizuka sold her soul in the first place, she was in some ways at that same stage that Katrina is right now. So it might be a situation where somebody is seeking something that maybe she's after at that point. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, now that your question is making me understand my book better, thank you. But yeah, this was, so it was always this idea of, will she or won't she? And then towards the end, finally, I definitely said she's not. And you know, that's where, by the way, that's where the fish comes from, right? The idea of, and I wanted to make it seem very natural that somebody would eat their young. But what you're talking about in that parallel, and having to run that will she, won't she parallel, the growing love for Katrina, but also the growing hunger to live, yeah, that was the hardest thing I did in the book. And the fact that you're all sitting here makes me feel, I guess I pulled it off to a point, so thank you. Hi.
Hey. So this was a really validating book to read as a trans person. Someone mentioned sharing just like the vivid images first. I want to share a vivid image with you. When you were, the part that you were reading here today, I got to that on my audiobook, because I can't read, in the gym, and felt myself getting very close to bawling, and just had to take some deep breaths and not be the guy breaking down in the gym. But my question for you, I know nothing about the music world, and I'd assumed that you were a violinist just from reading. And when you shared that you're a pianist, it reminded me of the last piece that Katrina plays, and the fact that that was written by also a pianist writing for the violin. So I think it's a really interesting choice, and I was wondering why you chose to write this book with a violin instead of something you're more familiar with.
Because if I wrote it about that's a beautiful question. If I wrote it about the piano, I could never make you think I knew what I was doing. It's ironic that I'm a pretty good pianist, okay? I'm not great, I'm pretty good. And I would write like a pretty good pianist. I'm familiar with the piano. I still have moments of wonder because it's beautiful, but it's not new. When I was learning about the violin, everything was fresh, everything was new. How the tuning pegs fit, how the bridge was, everything was new, and it all kind of like stuck out to me. And so I thought, I want to get this right, so I want and get some details in, because I had so many, because the details were so in front of me and so vivid, by writing them and then by letting myself talk about what they meant, I suddenly sounded a lot smarter than I was. Yeah, and also, I wanted to learn a couple things. So like, for example, I went into the Luthier's, and I went in and I said, hi, I'm a novelist, I'm working on this, can I come see your workshop? And then I asked, and I kicked a $500,000 cello, and it was horrible. But I asked, what do you look for in a violin to know the violin's built well? And he goes, oh, well, the scroll. I go, the scroll? Yeah, the carving. You really can show off how good the scroll is, how the carving is and all of that. And I go, thank you. I got what I needed. Sometimes you hit something that you hit something very esoteric about it, and you hit it hard, so then if the other things you don't know about, people won't notice. So it's a lot of that. Also, have any of you been like in grad school, worked as a TA? They talk about being 5 pages ahead. You don't have to know everything, you just have to be 5 pages ahead. So that was the goal. But I really did need to get everything right, because people commit their lives to the violin. And so I wanted to do honor to that. Whenever you're working with somebody else's world, you have to be super careful to get it right. And so I really, really, really did my homework. And so far, we've been all right. But great question, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your process.
Well, thank you for being here.
Yes, I feel like I understand the book so much better after hearing how much thought and effort you put into the details and the character arcs. And I mean, I feel like Shizuki was a better character than you say she was. And
that you bought the book, so it's your opinion. We're good.
Well, one of the points one of the things that I noticed too at the end with Shirley was, Katrina's sister, as you say, that she defended Shirley for Lan, or for Katrina too, but and I thought that was also a very positive character person to defend Shirley and say, Lan, you need to be better for Shirley. I don't know if you have anything to say about Shirley. Or
well, Shirley's not as bad as, Shizuka's not as bad as she thinks she is. But the problem too, though, is she literally has signed something to the devil, which is not cool. But with Shirley, the idea of being a real human, and with being trans, being the idea of being a real woman, they come, surely trans. And so the idea of, you never know for sure if you're a real human being. You never know for sure if you're, and the thing is, when you're trans, you ask yourself, am I really a woman? Then you realize nobody knows if they're really who they are. And trying to make sense of it anyway, and trying to live a world anyway. And so so when I was writing Shirley, the idea of being invalidated from the beginning because she was artificial, and then slowly trying to find herself in who she was to the point where she can say she loves her mother, that was sort of important. I lost my mother a couple years ago, and just this idea of, thank goodness that I can say I loved her, because for a while things were really difficult.
Hi, I'm a bookseller in San Francisco, and your book is one of my staff picks. Every once in a while, I get asked by somebody to pitch it to them. And although a lot of my questions actually got answered in the earlier discussion, thank you so much, I have to wonder, for whoever you pitched this book to before you started writing or while you were writing, how that went.
Oh, gosh. I still don't know how I sold this book, one of the agents was talking about looking for manuscripts like Light from Uncommon Stars, and somebody else wrote, how the hell are you going to get that? But what I sold it as is, I wanted to write about space. I wanted to write about things that interested me, but I wanted to bring the people I grew up with there. I wanted to have a space adventure, but I wanted space adventure with my family. I wanted to give my family the stars, my chosen family the stars, and I wanted to give them donuts. Because, the thing is, I did know a donut family. I mean, my friend Walter, it's like, I was working with him, and his family owns a donut shop. And they go, "You're so lucky, you have a donut shop." Fuck donut, I hate donut. All the time, donut, fuck donut, And so yeah, I always, Walter Shea, if you're listening, but anyway, but yeah. Mhm. Good. And by the way, later, if you want me to come over sign books, let me know, okay?
I have a question and a
Hi, Steve.
completely...
I know Steve from way back.
Way back.
Way back.
I have a question and a completely irrelevant request. Question is, how do you think that being a musician has informed your prose?
It helps me with the pacing. It helps me crescendo to crescendo, song structure, and also with the sentences. So when I'm reading out, I hope, when I'm reading out loud, I hope that some of the melody of the song, of the reading comes
Reading is exactly why I asked the question, yeah.
And so, it really is, and by the way, this is why my next book is taking so long. But the idea is I really do think of writing as a lyric line. I think of just being able to play into the ear. Something that I don't tell very many people is I have very, very bad tinnitus. I'm hearing zzz, all the time. So if I can make the voice in my head musical, it really helps.
My irrelevant request, would you do your Maya Angelou impression?
I can't do that, no. No, but I do, no. I'll do it later.
It's dead on.
No, but really, it's been a long time since I've done Maya. I'll do it another time, but thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your impression. But your book was recommended to our book club, and we all loved it, by the way. And for me, as a queer person, Shizuka and Lan, I was actually towards the end.
It's funny. I forget the names of my characters too.
Yeah, I'm always afraid of mispronouncing, but. In any case, I loved all the characters, and my question is, I guess while I was reading it, I was kind of like, oh my God, how is Shizuka, how are they going to get out of this predicament, And I was so happy that Shizuka and Lan ended up on a spaceship together. And I guess I was wondering in your writing process, or did you know how they were going to end up in space, or were there alternative endings, and would it have changed the hope of the story, or is that dependent on the reader?
There had been a situation where, with Shizuka, I had thought about Shizuka sacrificing herself. It would be very, very interesting. It would be a very simple way for a trans person or a queer person to just obliterate themselves in the name of the greater good. And I thought about that, but I wanted to give a happy ending. She deserved it. Thing about it is I'm an older trans woman right now. I'm single, life goals, to hold hands with somebody, shoot through a giant donut, and give music to the rest of the universe. It's like, if I can't have that in real life, well, who knows? But I can sure as hell write that down. Call it I am, I'm just putting it down on paper, tossing it to the universe. Oh, yeah, they're just hanging out. I mean, in fact, there are some times where somebody will write an email, and I'll say, yeah, Katrina, and it's like, Shizuka says, hi, there's so-and-so. By the way, I'm the writer, this is canon. Oh, they're hanging out right now, and I will revisit the characters sooner or later. I wasn't kidding that I was thinking about writing, because Lucia, there's a lot about Lucia, it's like, there's a lot in there that, I've got about 50,000 words on Lucia that I don't have, that aren't in the book. So my next novel is going to be a real spin-off, but I am thinking of coming back to the characters. I'll do the Maya Angelou for you later when I've had a drink.
We have a minute. Are you sure? Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ryka and
Thank
Julia,
you.
for this stimulating and wonderful conversation.
Wasn't Julia great?
Yes. We're so happy that you came out to join us.
Yeah, can everybody please give the public library a big old hand, please? Remember, they are our libraries, our institutions of learning and of becoming more than we're told to be, are under a lot of attack. So if you just do it, please support the libraries, because they are the place that, they're the salvation of democracy.
Thanks for coming out. Thank you. Thank you so much. I do want to remind everyone that we do have the book club for this book coming up on the 24th. It's a virtual book club, so I'd love to see you all there virtually. And then I do have a few more announcements. Our July-August selection is Say Hello to My Little Friend by Janine Capo-Crusette. So these will be on the shelves in your local branches starting close to July 1st. And then I want to remind everyone that we are in the middle of Summer Stride. It's not just for kids, it's for adults also. So read your 20 hours and pick up your tote at your local branch. And then finally, we have Borderlands Books in the back selling some books for us. And we will finish up with a signing out in the lobby. So thank you all for attending.
And if, yeah.